So we're live. It's Sunday night at 7 o'clock. And as everyone knows, 7 o'clock on Sunday nights, as well as 7 o'clock on Wednesday nights, it's time for the 76 Capital Leadership Series. And my name is Wayne Kimmel, managing partner of 76 Capital, and really excited to have some really great guests tonight. We have two of the most probably accomplished sportscasters in all of Philadelphia sports, Neil Hartman and Leslie Gudel. And it's just really going to be great to listen to and to hear all the stories that they have. You know, many of you know at 76 Capital, what we are is we're a venture capital fund that invests in smart and nice individuals and entrepreneurs that want to do the next big thing, create something really big. We want to work with people that are passionate, who are really behind everything that they want to go do. We want to work with entrepreneurs who want to do that. We want to work with co-investors who want to do that with us. We want people who want to be involved with us, who want to work with us and our companies. Please feel free to reach out to us at 76 Capital, and we'll share all of that information as you see that on the screen right now. You know, I couldn't really go into the news right away that we typically do at this point, until I really kind of talk about what's going on in the world. And as you know, our philosophy is all about trying to make this world a better place and doing it with the right kinds of people. And we're in a really tough spot right now in America. I mean, you think about what's happening in the world and the shooting in Minneapolis, the terrible things in Minneapolis, what happened with that person who was just literally, it was just terrible what happened in Minnesota. And, you know, and then yesterday we had something incredible happen. You know, we had NASA and SpaceX launch two men into space, you know, using the latest and greatest technology. So you had this incredible dichotomy of what was going on here in America. And then last night, we started off yesterday with some nice peaceful protests. And I think that's what this world nearly needs. But then it got ugly, really, really ugly. And in cities like where I am in Philadelphia and the surrounding areas, I mean, it's gotten incredibly ugly. You know, and we had one of our athlete venture group guys, Brian Westbrook, talking about how, you know, he feels everyone's fatigue and pain and hurt because of what's happened with COVID and everything happening. But tearing up the city is not the answer. And I completely agree with him. And you have, you know, former Vice President Joe Biden talking about, you know, we're a nation in pain right now, but we must not allow this pain to destroy us. And I also completely agree with what he had to say. And these are really tough times, but you know what? We're stronger than all this, and we can be better. And that's what we're doing at 76 Capital is we're building great companies. We're doing it in the sports industry, but as we always said, we want to do it the right way. So let's get into the news for tonight, and we'll talk a little bit more about this with our special guests. You know, this was a really great week at 76 Capital prior to all of this. We had talked about, you know, we had the former CEO, or the current CEO, of Forte, which is one of our fitness companies. She joined us. Her name is Lauren Foundos. She joined us on the 76 Capital Leadership Series a few weeks ago, and we talked about our new investment in her fitness streaming technology company. Really amazing things that she's doing, and she is truly changing the way you do things from a fitness perspective. Our second news story tonight is around Nerd Street Gamers. This week, Nerd Street Gamers announced an additional partnership with Comcast. As everyone knows, Nerd Street Gamers is a esports company that has investments from us at 76 Capital, along with Comcast and Five Below. But this week, Nerd Street additionally announced a streaming contract where they're getting super fast internet speeds for all of their locations and all their tournaments through Comcast. We're really excited about that. Our third story of the night is about play-by-play sports broadcasting camps. And we'll talk about that a little more with Neil and Leslie as well. But play-by-play sports broadcasting camps, we had Jeremy and Steve, the two CEOs of the company, on our show recently, and they talked about how they are now doing virtual camps this summer. And that's a really great way for young people to get an opportunity to experience how to become a great broadcaster like Leslie and Neil. So playbyplaycamps.com is a great place to find out about their virtual camps. And our last story of the night is an exciting one. It has to do with my partner, John Powell. And unfortunately, the title of this of the documentary that he was involved with is, quite frankly, it's even in more crisis right now because of what's happening with some of the looting and other things that are going on in the country. But John did a documentary. It won an award. It won award at the Telly Awards for what they did in and around the whole crisis in Kensington. So at this point, let's move on to our show. We've got two great guests. We're going to bring on Leslie Gudel and Neil Hartman, and really excited to have them. They are two of the most, as I said earlier, most accomplished sports broadcasters in all of Philadelphia. And it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks, Wayne.
Super stuff. I can't help but asking, we're going to get into, what we do here on our 76 Capital Leadership Series is talk about, what it really takes to be a leader, what it really means to go out there and make things happen. But I think starting off, both of you had a lot of time in front of the camera together, just doing it yourselves and had to deal with things bigger than sports. We're in the middle of something right now with COVID-19 and all the things that are happening out there today. I believe both of you were on the air at the time when 9/11 occurred. Mm-hmm. You experienced that incredible, terrible tragedy. What are some of your thoughts as to what's going on today in the world?
Neil, you want to go first or you want me to? Hi, Neil, by the way.
Hi, Leslie. Why don't you go first, Leslie? Go ahead.
So I think journalism has changed a lot since I first got into the business. I remember somebody very specifically telling me, another friend of mine, and it was in sports journalism in Los Angeles, you're there to deliver the news. You're not there to be the news or give your opinion. So I was always of the mindset that it was my job to convey what was going on, convey the things that we saw around us. I remember vividly doing Harry Callis's funeral with Michael Barkan. That was a day when we could express ourselves because we knew Harry. But when you were talking about events that were taking place around you, I was always taught that you're just supposed to be sharing what's out there as opposed to be giving your opinion. So I'm consistent with this on social media too. I tend to stay away from giving an opinion because no matter what you say, there will be people who agree and who disagree. Let's face it, what has happened this weekend is tragic in so many ways. I've never seen more solidarity when it comes to supporting a victim. We saw something awful happen. And what's happened since then, there's such an opportunity for progress here. But again, I kind of feel like I love having these conversations with people, but it's very hard to express too much about how I feel in this area without being able to have a dialogue. Does that make sense? As opposed to, saying this is the way I think it is and I think it should be. But that comes from my training. I was just brought up in journalism that way.
Wayne, last night at dinner, I have two kids. One's just finished her sophomore year at the University of Maryland, where I know you attended. And then my son is going to be entering college coming up here at Johns Hopkins in the fall. And my wife, Lauren, and we're all sitting around talking about the events of what occurred yesterday. And you spoke about it earlier. We all watched the SpaceX launch and what an incredible moment that was. And then to see what's happening last night was just really sad. I was very sad for not only Philadelphia, where I live, but also for around the nation. And I see these reports on what's going on throughout the country. It's very sad. And I hope that we can find some answers soon, and that this does, in fact, create some change in our society, both socially and economically. And that's my hope, that something good comes out of all this, because there's so much pain that has occurred in the last 48 hours or so, or might even be longer than that at this point. It does remind me that I did a story with John Chaney, the Hall of Fame basketball coach at Temple. When Barack Obama was inaugurated, I watched the inauguration with John Chaney, and he had tears coming down his eyes because he said, I never thought I would see an African-American president in my lifetime. And to be there during that significant moment in our nation's history and watching it with John Chaney was really powerful for me. And so I look back at moments like that. And yes, we did work when it was 9/11 and we had to deal with that situation. And Leslie, I know I was on the field. Were you on the field that day when Larry Boa has a tear going down his
Yeah,
eye?
Wayne and I, before we got on, we're talking about that and conveying those emotions, right? We're conveying the emotions of what you're seeing of other people, because that's the powerful image that you have. And we asked ourselves the same question at the time, like, what is this? What change is going to occur because of this? And I mean, I feel like we're left at the end of this weekend with asking ourselves, what change is going to occur? How do we make this how do we progress from where we were to where we want to be, and really create change? And I think you mentioned your kids, Neil. Like, this has been such a great opportunity to talk to the kids, and I feel like this generation is growing up with so much more empathy and understanding than we did at that age. It's awful that they have to see it, but I hear it in their voices. They want the change, and
they do.
That makes me hopeful.
Wayne, I would say that sports has always been the vehicle that we have used as a country to get through these difficult times. Yeah. And we don't really have sports right now. We have pockets of moments here and there, some events that are occurring that have been very well received by the viewing audience, but we haven't had our games to sit back and let that help the nation heal. So this is going to be unprecedented times to deal with such a powerful issue that what we're dealing with today, and then to have hopefully sports come back and help us as a country come back together as one. I certainly hope we get sports back soon, but more importantly, I hope we get this issue resolved collectively as a nation.
That's a great point. I was going to ask you what sports could do to help, but you're right. I mean, it's a tough situation because we don't have live sports yet. It's coming back, but they're not here at this moment because we have this. There's so many things that are happening. I mean, COVID-19 was the worst thing ever. But you said something interesting also about your family and the kind of conversations that you're having now. And right before we got on, I was talking. We were sitting at dinner, and my daughter said, she said to my mother-in-law, she said, did you hear what the mayor of Atlanta said? And my mother-in-law said, what did he say? My daughter said, no, what did she say? So it was really, let me tell you what she said. So it was really amazing, what can happen, and hopefully we'll have some really good out of all this.
Well, and you make a great point, Wayne, because I think that there are some incredibly powerful voices out there right now, and you have to look for them. You have to listen to the police officer that's out there saying, when people are saying, walk with us. And he's like, I want to walk with you. Like, that's what I'm here for. The bonding together, that's happening. The people in there, I wasn't the least bit surprised to see people sweeping the glass up in Center City today and helping people clean up. There's so much good out there, and you have to look for it, unfortunately, because so much of the news is focused on the bad. And we've had a heavy weekend, a really heavy weekend. And back to what you said about sports. Not only does sports take us away from the heaviness of all of this for a moment here in time, but getting out and being with people, and we aren't able to do that right now, not to any great degree. So there's really, we're inside watching this and having to take it all on after we're all going through some isolation and a lot of people dealing with depression right now. So it's a very heavy time.
Well, it's great to have both of you on the show, and I really appreciate your thoughts on this. And we'll really want to talk about leadership and entrepreneurship and your careers and the things that both of you have done and in the sports industry. So as for some of you who have just joined us, we're on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. It's Sunday night. That means that we're on the air. We're on Facebook Live. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter. We're on YouTube. So you can watch us in all those different places. We have two great guests. And Neil, just to get started, I mean, on this part of the interview, I really wanted to I'd love to hear about your family. You talked about your family. Your daughter just graduated. Your son, your wife. We have a great shot of your whole family. I'd love to just hear what's going on in your world. Well,
it's Leslie knows as much about my family as I know about hers. And it's I refer to Leslie often as my TV wife. We spent 12 years together, but she knows everything.
13. 13.
13. Okay, 13 years. But yeah, so she knows a lot about my family and a lot about my kids. And so that's my daughter, Talia. She's just finished her sophomore year at the University of Maryland, where go Terps, Wayne. There you go.
There you go. Thank you.
And my son,
Got to get that in on the show.
That's right. My son, Owen, is about to graduate from Lenape High School in Medford, New Jersey. My wife, Lauren, there. And this is all of us at obviously at a Lenape football game. They had a great year. My son had a great year, and he's going to go on to play football at Johns Hopkins University in the fall. So we're excited about that. And Talia is going to be about a half hour down the road in College Park. So I want to spend a lot of time in Maryland in the next 3-4 years. So I'm looking forward to that. But, one of the things being a sportscaster, I remember my boss, Michelle Murray, one time asked me, she goes, what is it that you don't like about the job? And I said, it's being away from my family at night. I was a sportscaster for close to 35 years, and I rarely had dinner weekdays with my family. And that is a downer. That's a tough part of the job. That
He
you're
had 4
not
healthy
there
choice meals, microwave meals every night, Wayne, just in case you wondered.
So yes,
the stuff we know about people.
Everybody in the newsroom knew that Hartman stuffed the freezer in our small little kitchen at Comcast SportsNet with these healthy choice. And I would take 2 of them out, pop them into the microwave, and that's what I would eat at my desk. And I did it every night for close to 20 years. So, I'm resourceful. I can figure out how to get a meal in. But you know what? It's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine, Leslie, him, Brian Dashevsky. He's our media manager at Comcast Sportsnet, still is to this day. I was talking to him the other day, and he brought up my kids. And when the kids were young, we would say goodnight. Our meeting for the 10 o'clock show was at 7 o'clock. And my kids would go to bed when they were younger at that time. And they would come on a conference call on a speaker, and they would hear all of us. And everybody in the newsroom would say, good night, Talia, good night, Owen. And so Brian just goes to me the other day and says, Neil, how, and I would refer sometimes as my kids at the time as pizzas, the little pizzas. And he goes, how's the little pizzas? How are they doing? Do they need me to say good night to them? So, this is what we grew up in. And I can share the same stories about Leslie and her family and her kids. So that's what we did growing up together in an environment that was very much a family environment.
That's so great, and I got to see Leslie and her kids at the Maxwell Awards, Maxwell Football Awards this past year. And Leslie, is that something that you did with your kids throughout your career, where they got an opportunity to be with you on the field?
My son has been to a couple of Phillies games when he was very young. In fact, great story. He had to sit out in the dugout one time when I went into the clubhouse, and Roy Oswalt was his new favorite player. Chase was 4 at the time, and he was sitting in the dugout, and a couple of people were watching him while I went into the clubhouse, and I saw Roy Oswalt. I said, can you go out and have say hello to my son? He's a big fan of yours. And so he walked out, and he said, I have an idea. Why don't I give you my jersey? And you pitch for me tonight, and I'll go sit in the stands and eat hot dogs. And Chase goes, you're not starting tonight. Kyle Kendrick's starting tonight. Yes, I'm so glad I had that reliever starter conversation on the way to the ballpark. But he's been around it. They've been around it, but she's had less interest in it than he has. But it's really, they both are interested in journalism. She wants to be an entertainment reporter. He would like to go into sports broadcasting of some sort, and then to get an opportunity this year at the Maxwell Club Awards to be a junior reporter, and for them to be there with me and our friend Kim Hope, who came down to help keep them corralled when I was busy. And it was just it was an amazing couple of days and a great experience for all of us.
By the way, Wayne, Chase came to our camp last year. Has it been 2 years, Leslie, or 1 year? 2 years?
Yeah, he's gone just last year. Yeah, it was last year.
So we had him at our Villanova camp with a sports broadcasting camp. So he definitely has an eye for what his mom did. That's for sure.
He's my contrarian, so he's going to be. They're growing up in the argumentative journalism world, different than Neil and I were trained.
Well, Leslie, when you were growing up, was it something that was being a broadcaster or a sportscaster something that you wanted to do?
Oh, Wayne, I was a mess growing up. I I took the back door to getting into this profession. I missed 97 classes the first semester of my senior year. Yes, 97. I remember the assistant principal telling me that to my father pretty vividly. I didn't get to graduate with my high school class because I just missed too many classes. I had to take 27 hours of adult school where I did the 10 key and the typewriter, because clearly I was destined for a job, a secretarial job in my life at that point, at best. And then I had a wonderful woman in my life named Rachel Parker, who was my boyfriend's mom and guided me to the community college and helped. She knew I wanted to go to UCLA. My dad said, "You go to college or you're on your own." And so I went to 2 years of community college, got on the dean's list, went to UCLA. Walked on the crew team, got to row varsity crew, was the team captain, and all my resume says is, team captain, UCLA varsity crew, and a degree from UCLA. No one knows any differently. Well, now they do. But I had journalism wasn't even my thought. I got out of there. I worked in the title insurance industry and mortgage industry for 5 years out of school, and said I've always wanted to do sports. I grew up, my dad taking me to Dodger games, Laker games, from the age of 4. So I made a change at 27 years old. So I am a completely different story than the way anybody's getting into the business these days, and pretty much any time.
Well, Neil, that's what I keep saying about play-by-play sports broadcasting camps. We got to extend it to the 27-year-olds. We got to
right, exactly.
No, I think we're definitely heading there, Wayne. As you know, adult workshop is something that we'd like to do, because do you know how many times, and Leslie can probably agree with this, that how many times in the course of my career that somebody would come up to me, they're a 28-year-old pharmaceutical sales rep doing great living, and they go, "I'm miserable. I want to do what you do. I want to be a sportscaster. I want to be around the teams. I want to be around the games." And they say, "What can I do?" And I said, "Well, first of all, you're going to take a hit financially because you're going to start at the very bottom. But why don't you try to maybe continue your job, and then on the weekends or on your off time, try to work at a local radio station, at a newspaper, and work into the business that way." But if we had a workshop that we offer to people that are interested in getting involved in sports broadcasting, that we can help them and kind of guide them along as they're working their regular job. Because you just can't shut off your job, not make any money, and say, "I want to be a sportscaster." It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. No, he's right about that. I mean, I was going to work during the day and then interning at Prime Ticket at night with all the college students. But, I was coming in my dress clothes and they were all in their college clothes. And I just sent a tape out and got a job in Pocatello, Idaho, and packed up my Miata and headed to Idaho. I mean, completely different. I always thought I was going to be a producer. I love the storytelling aspect of it. Having been in sales and moving to journalism, the funny thing is that you get told no a lot in both places. So once I was in sales, I didn't have to worry about having kind of a thick skin. And then I cut my teeth in Idaho at a time when there was no YouTube. There was no social media, so I could mess up there and no one knew. So now they get to do it in high school and college and on the air. I mean, my daughter's been doing TV stuff at Conestoga High School already, and she's a sophomore. So the opportunities are way more abundant now than they were when I was younger.
So what happened after you were in Idaho? Where did you go? Where did you go next?
That was a long 7 months, but it was awesome. I went back to LA. So I sent my, that was at a time when very few women were in the business. So the guy who was our executive producer, Tom Riley, had seen my tape from day one and said, "Keep working at it, Les," to 8 months later. And they were looking for someone because they were taking the show Press Box nationally. And there just weren't a lot of women doing it. They were putting women on the air that maybe had some broadcasting experience, but didn't know sports. So I got hired back at Prime Sports in less than a year. And, that ruffled some feathers from some people who wanted to do it. But I took the risk. I moved to Pocatello, Idaho, and cut my teeth. And I wasn't probably ready. Just as, I'll give Neil some props here. Just as when I moved to Philadelphia and I'm, given the role as, we were the main anchors of the news program, and I knew nothing about Philadelphia. I had no extensive anchor experience because I had been reporting in LA and done some other stuff. And Neil, if it wasn't for Neil, those first 2 years, I mean, I would get hung up on names. I would get hung up on locations, and he bailed me out on everything. We had a 1 hour show with 45 minutes of script, and you'd see the producer running down the hallway with like a 10-minute John Chaney package from Neil being in the Italian market with him, and we'd be like, how are we going to fill? And somehow or another, Neil and I filled 10-15 minutes somehow, some way, and Neil carried that. I learned more from him and working with him those first couple of years than, he was just so supportive. So it's a big deal.
Well, let's talk about that tiny little startup that happened, in 1997 in Philadelphia. I mean, it was pretty incredible what happened. And look, Comcast SportsNet was probably one of the first, we had talked about Prime Sport, maybe there were a couple other sports nets, regional sports nets in the country, but Philly just went in head first, and it was the brainchild of guys like Ed Snyder, and it was amazing to see what happened. And as you just said, I mean, you and Neil were the stars. I mean, right there every night, and pre and post game, and it became something that we're all used to now. We're all used to having a pregame show with your local, sportscasters, and you're used to having your local, kind of what happened after the game, and those were things that were really created by your group. And so, Neil, what was that like, being in that, in that situation? And I'd love to hear if you could describe what it was like. I've heard some great stories from the beginning of Comcast SportsNet.
Well, when I see this picture that you guys were showing of the original anchors at Comcast SportsNet, Michael Barkam was a very important part of what we did back then, and still is for part of NBC Sports Philadelphia. And Michael had worked at Channel 3. I worked at Channel 3. Michael then went to Boston, but he came back. Dee Lynham obviously is from the Philly area, but went to UCLA like Leslie did, but she moved around in a couple of different markets and came back to Philadelphia. So Ron Burke was at Channel 10, so he had some strong Philadelphia ties. So we had a bunch of people that did have that tie to Philadelphia, which I think was really important in the beginning. But then you bring people like Pat Boyle, who's now our lead anchor in Chicago, and then you have Pete Christie, who was from Texas, and you have let's see, who else am I missing? Derek Gunn from Pittsburgh. How can I forget Gunner? Come on, how can I forget Gunner? Well, he's going to shoot me a text right now.
That I have you on the show and not him. So I'm going to get a call about this.
There you go. But we had people that had the Philadelphia ties, and then you bring these other broadcasters who all are different. Every anchor was different. They all brought a different skill set to the table. So I was at the press conference when Brian Roberts announced at the Spectrum that he was buying the team and also was going to start this regional sports network. And I was working at Channel 3 at the time, KYW3 in Philadelphia, and I go, this thing's going to be pretty interesting. Well, as it turns out, Tom Stefakis, who ran our news operation, along with Jim Cuddity, were producers with me at Channel 3. Another producer named Jim Ruling became our assignment manager. I was there, and so four of us head over to Comcast SportsNet. We were all talking with them, but we didn't tell each other that we were talking to Comcast. And it was a gentleman by the name of Jack Williams, who was the president of Comcast SportsNet in the probably about first 10 years or so, Leslie, I would say.
Yeah.
Jack ran it. And so Jack was best friends with Ed Snyder. So whatever we needed, we were able to get because of the relationship Jack had with Ed Snyder, who was the point person for Comcast to build this regional sports network. So we were able to build this network with really all the bells and whistles that we could have possibly have needed to be successful as a news operation and, of course, to do the games. And it was immensely successful. Yes, there were a couple other regional sports networks out there, but we started, I guess there's now 7 to 10. I don't even know what the number is, that NBC Sports Philadelphia kind of morphed into other markets throughout the country. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what we were able to start. And, those early years, I wouldn't replace them for anything. They were great. They were great years.
So how were your offices at the beginning, Leslie?
We were in trailers outside a dirt lot where they were building a studio for us. You had to trek across the dirt to get in the back door to get in the studio that they were making. It was, it's funny because you said, Wayne, that we were like the stars of the beginning. There was no star.
Right.
Like there was no, everybody was everybody. I mean, it was a team, and that was the coolest thing about it. There was nobody who thought that they were better than somebody else, or that they had a bigger job than anybody else. Because, I mean, as any anchor will tell you, the people who are bringing the news to you are the reporters who are out in the field and are bringing it back. So there's an equal amount of respect when you're all coming in at the same time as well. I think that's why the city wasn't as hard on me as maybe they would have been if I came in out of nowhere. The city was excited about this when we started, and we were excited about it, and we got to make decisions. Like, anybody who knows me knows I love to build things. I have this entrepreneurial thing that I like to do. And I look back on Comcast SportsNet, and we built it. Like, we started it. We sat in these trailers and we talked about what we wanted to do for the show. Neil and I disagreed on many things. From writing our shot sheets for the highlights to, what coverage. I mean, I couldn't get anybody for the life of me to cover NASCAR, no matter how big it was. I was like, guys, we had constant disagreements, but in such a productive way, and we all worked together and respected each other. And we didn't care that we were sitting in a trailer. That's part of the story now. It's part of the climb to making something good. And we all got a voice in that. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, again, we're so excited to have Leslie Gudel and Neil Hartman on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. If you're tuning in right now, we're live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on YouTube. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And we're talking with Neil and Leslie about what it was like to start Comcast SportsNet, which is now NBC Sports Philly. So, Leslie, I'd love to hear, what was a day in the life? I mean, you talked about different parts of this, but, what time did you get there in the morning? And then what was a day like? And how did you, oh my God, was it like
Gosh, I'm not even sure I woke up in the morning at that point in my life. We would get there at 3:30 and have a meeting, and then we would do our show. We would write our shows, and our show went on from 6 to 6:30 for the first, I don't know how many years, Neil, or 6:30. I can't remember now.
6 to 6:30. Then it changed.
Yeah, and then it moved to 6:30 to 7. Right. And then we'd prepare for the next show. And Neil and I would oftentimes go over to the vet or go downstairs and get dinner in one of the press rooms. If there was a game, go watch a little bit of the game, and come back and rinse and repeat. And we were done typically at 11, depending on the night. And a lot of us were young and single, and not Neil and not Michael. They've had little kids shortly after we started, but we would all go out. Like, a lot of us spent a lot of time out in Center City, going to different places. And that was the great part. I mean, in addition to the people that you saw on the air, the team of people behind the scenes that helped, produce all these shows, they were all part of this. It was one big family. And so that was the day. It was like 3:30 to 11 was your typical day, though, from the beginning.
Well, that was one of my questions, and you both are too good. I really wanted to hear about some of the behind the scenes, right? Who were some of the people that you really relied on, that really made the shows what they were? And are there some, you watch like the Last Dance with Michael Jordan, and it shows him with the security guard, right? And then it's, his relationship with his security guards and the guy with the curly hair and whatever his name is, but do you have some stories like that? I'm sure you do.
Well, right there you see Jerry Hines, who's the photographer. I think our photographers and editors are really the unsung heroes of the success of Comcast SportsNet and NBC Sports Philadelphia. This is in Kansas City during the NCAA tournament. LaSalle actually went on to the Sweet 16 that year. And Jerry Hines was a photographer that I worked with many, many times. And I think of the editors over the years that worked with us and really made us look good. These guys are extremely talented. We would, particularly in the early years, we did a lot of longer format. pieces than they do today. And it was really a great opportunity to be able to be very creative, create some great relationships with teams and players and people and so forth, and to be able to do things that I personally enjoy doing. But I would say the production staff are the people that I think are the unsung heroes.
Yeah, and I think that also, I mean, I think it's hard because you don't want to name names because you don't want to leave somebody out.
Yeah.
But I especially from the beginning, Rob Kester and Matt Howley and Rob Ellis stand out to me and Jim Ruling certainly stands out to me as people from the very beginning that were, putting these shows together with us. Dan Roche shortly after, and like it's a group that grew together, and many, everybody's still somehow in that business. Neil Slotkin, I think, was there in the beginning, right? I mean, so there's a lot of people, and I'm sure, the list is long, but they were the, producers at the time. And, Neil, am I missing anybody that's worth talking?
I would just say the senior supervising producer of Comcast SportsNet today is a guy named Mike Gaddy. Yeah. He was one of our first interns. So think about that. 1997, he went
to LaSalle. Yep.
He went to LaSalle, interned with us, and now some 20 plus years later, he is now number 3 or 4 in command. Who knows? Whatever the hierarchy goes. Right. But he's one of the upper management people in running our the news operation and the newsroom, or they call it today the content room at NBC Sports Philadelphia.
And there are certainly a lot of others that came shortly after. That are still there. Casey Feeney was instrumental in helping me with our Phillies coverage. There was just a lot of people along the way, but it was a small, tight-knit group in the beginning.
So you think about the industry when you started, right, in 97, and the way sports was reported at the time, and it was local TV. You go to your quick 5-minute sports thing, and Neil, you did that, right? And then it was, then all of a sudden you get a half hour, then you get an hour, you get to be able to do more. You had sports talk radio at the time was so important. People actually listened to the radio back then. Sorry to our friends in radio still, but it was a different time. And now where we're, in the time we're living today, where technology's changed, where you have, new phones and social media. What do you think it would have been like, with the things that you were doing? And how, if there was social media, if there was Facebook, if there was Twitter, what that would have been like for all of you?
I think pretty significant change for sure. I mean, I think what we see today, the whole industry's changed. Kids don't really watch television.
We barely had internet. We were trying to pull
Oh my goodness. Wayne, this is what it was like in the early years. Okay. That's a great one though. We had a production assistant by the name of Peyton Scanlon, who would come in, and Leslie mentioned our 3:30 meeting, would come in before the 3:30 meeting and would physically print all the stories that we needed to read for that day, because we had one printer with internet connection in the newsroom. And this is what's really embarrassing. Mark Cuban came in. Do you remember this one? Mark Cuban, who was the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, came in. I don't even know why. I guess he was doing a show, and he came in the newsroom, and I was asking.
We were out of the trailers, but not much.
Yeah, we're in the newsroom. And I tell him, I said, well, I was asking him a question. He goes, well, let's go on and I'll show you on the internet. I go, I don't have internet on my computer here. And we have one. It's over there on the other side of the newsroom. I mean, this is Mark Cuban. And, but just those days, it's so much different. And now the way, these devices today, how this is what you program for. You program for this. You program for your laptop. You program, for anything but television pretty much today. It's significantly different, I would say, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, just to think about, how, not only the way you cover the players themselves. I mean, today, you're covering what did so-and-so tweet, or what did they put up on Instagram. And, there's so much more in those, just the nights of the play, when players are running around at night, and, they can't run around at night like they used to anymore, because those things, it's just, they're just all over the place, and they have to.
Wayne, you bring up an interesting point. I mean, they're wanting to stay out of the spotlight, but and arguably the business has changed because of Twitter in particular, but social media and the instantaneous dumping of information that gets out there. So there's no need to wait for the sports news show to come on. So it changed the business and arguably ran Neil and I out of jobs. But at the same time, it's also the way for us to stay continuously connected with the people, with that base that we really connected with over those years. So we're able to stay involved in ways that if it didn't exist, people would never see us. We wouldn't even be out there anymore. So, it's got its pluses and minuses.
Well, you did cover some really incredible things over the years in Philadelphia. I mean, you think about, whether it was actually today they had this Super Bowl game, the 2004 Super Bowl when the Eagles lost to the Patriots the first time. And you got to see, it was pretty awesome seeing, Brian Westbrook catch his touchdown pass, and see that this today made me, a little bit happy for a second, at least, during the day. Then, you had, we're covering the Phillies run, and the Flyers had a nice run at one point. And then, whether it was the Sixers and Iverson, and, here's, great picture of Leslie here. I mean, these are great. These were great memories. What are some of the things that really stick out in your minds over the years?
Neil, you can start.
Well, I feel very fortunate that in a city that sports means so much, the passion of the fans is why we were able to thrive at Comcast SportsNet in the early years. But because we didn't have great teams at the time, the teams slowly got better. And then we had a pretty good run there at times. You mentioned the Eagles going to the Super Bowl, and then, of course, the Phillies in 08 was miraculous. And, the Flyers, they've had some up and down years here and there. And then to be able to the Sixers in 01 with Iverson was a great run. So, yeah, we had those moments when all those local professional teams did really well, the four majors. And then Villanova in the latter part of my time at Comcast SportsNet, won two national championships, which I was always a college basketball guy and covered March Madness every year. And for me to be able to cover that, and brought both my kids, by the way, to the Final Four in Houston in 16 when they won, that was really special. And then there's others great moments. Smarty Jones comes to mind. I was able to do something with Bernard Hopkins, and all the all access stories that I was fortunate enough to do is what stands out for me personally. Practice stands out when I think about practice. So there's a lot of things
responsible for you talking about practice.
Yeah,
Neil doesn't get mentioned because obviously it's the interview itself and Allen Iverson, but Neil went down there and wouldn't leave him alone, and it was a classic.
Well, yeah. Give us a little bit more around that. I mean, you were so, first of all, the offices, your studios were there. I guess was the Wachovia Center at the time?
It's been a few things. Core States, First Union, Wachovia.
One of those places down there.
Yeah.
And so what were your interactions with Alan prior to all of this? And
so, yeah, I had a great relationship with Alan. I was at the draft when he got drafted out of Georgetown. I covered him during the course of his career. I was primarily an anchor, but Dee Lynam also did work for TNT or Turner. So she would be on the road during the playoffs. So I would have my times when I would cover the team and be the sideline reporter during the broadcast or cover the team. So during that 01 season, when they went to the NBA Finals, I was probably around them 3 months straight. And then the following year, they had a disappointing early departure with a blowout loss at Boston in the first round of the playoffs. And 4 days later, Alan has his press conference. And so that the whole background of that press conference was Tom Stathakis, who I referred to earlier, was the head of our news, and I was in his office. And we only had about maybe an hour and a half until the press conference was actually held in our building, but it was just, 2 levels down, and we're right there. So Tom says, why don't you ask that guy why he doesn't practice? And I said, it's a legitimate question. I'm going to go ask it. I asked it. It was about maybe 5 minutes into the press conference, and then it took a life of its own, and we've all seen what happens from there. But Alan, I saw him. I mentioned Villanova in the NCAA championship in 16. Alan that was the year he was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame, and he was introduced at a press conference in Houston. I went to attend it, and I had an opportunity to ask Alan about, did you know who asked you that question about practice the first time? And he goes, no, I had no idea. And I go, well, it was me. And he looked at me like, and I liked you. He could be very charming, but he had a little bit of an edge to him as well, which partly what made him such a great player. I think the world of Alan. I think what he accomplished in his career is remarkable for a player of his size. If you were up next to him, you'd be amazed too that he would go in the land of the giants and be able to score the way he scored. So yes, that moment that'll probably be on my tombstone. He asked the question about practice, because they'll still be saying practice. Well, not a game, practice. It'll probably still be going on, 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Well, Neil created a great thing by going out with these best, the NCAA teams, when they would go into the tournament and following them. He didn't mention it there, but I vividly remember St. Joe's run in the NCAA tournament, and Neil was with them the whole time. We did call Neil the Hartman jinx because nobody ever really would win when Neil was along. That's a great opportunity of building something, Wayne, right? Because he had this idea of, I've got access. We've got access. Let me go with this team and tell the story from behind the scenes. And we were doing that before anybody else was. Mm-hmm. And, it was a pretty, sometimes we had too much access. We had a particular moment early on when we had the camera in the Phillies locker room, and Neil and I threw it out to Derek Gunn and Desi Relaford, and they were doing a little interview, and in the background walks a guy with the towel on, stops, turns around and drops his towel. And we're like, not unknowingly that the camera's facing. And it was Ruben Amaro Jr. We laugh at this story all the time now, but our producers in our area, it's cable, and we're like, oh my gosh, I hope he turns around. That was when we stopped putting the camera into the middle of the locker room and turned it towards the wall. So we never had another incident like that again. So we had a lot of access in the beginning.
That's really amazing. I mean, and so funny, and just, I mean, I guess, again, you were so close to it all. And Neil, you said this earlier, so many people have said to you, I want to be in sports. I want to be around all this because it makes me happy. This is what I'm so passionate about. This is what I want to do. So I think it's pretty incredible. And, you think about, young people today, and that's one of the things that we do here on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, is really to think about how we inspire young people to want to do great things. And I know both of you actually and certainly Neil, you've taken a big role with us at play-by-play sports broadcasting camps. And here's a great picture of you and one of the CEOs of play-by-play sports broadcasting camps, Jeremy Treatment. And I think it's just really great to see how you're able to now take all the lessons and all the things that you've learned and share that with the young people. Is it something how does it make you feel to want to do when you get that opportunity to do that with these young people?
Well, when I left Comcast SportsNet 4 years ago. 4 years ago when I left, you have to find, what's my next chapter? What is it going to look like? And so there's a number of things I had interest in doing, and I kind of dabbled in a few different things to see what would stick. What did I really, truly enjoy? And what I found is I really like teaching and mentoring. And so I started teaching in higher education. I taught for 2 years at Temple University, and now I'm the director of the Center for Sports Communication and Social Impact at Rowan University. So I mentor students, bring high-profile guests to Rowan University. We have a growing program in our sports communication program, and I really, really enjoy it. And part of that is I also really enjoy dealing with the kids and dealing with these campers and this incredible program that Jeremy Treatment and Stephen Goldstein have started at play-by-play sports broadcasting camps. I went to him a few years ago and I say, listen, I'm interested in helping out. If you guys think I can help, I'd love to. I met with Stephen and Jeremy. And now this summer, if we didn't have COVID-19, I was planning to be involved in 6 camps this summer. Last year, I ran Chicago, ran South Jersey, helped run Philadelphia at Villanova, where Leslie's son, Chase, attended last year. Involved in the advanced workshop camp, and was going to be involved in a couple other camps this year as well. So I really enjoy it. I think what we're doing for these kids is awesome. You should see the way these kids gravitate to each other in the beginning, the first day. Some of them might not know anybody, but by the end of the week, they're best friends. They can't wait to see them the next year. What we teach them is practical. They get to do it on camera. They do it with their friends, their buddies, whatever it might be. It's a great opportunity. I started when I was 14 years old, Wayne. I had a high school radio station. At the time, it was one of only 100 in the country. And I grew up in Westport, Connecticut. And I feel very fortunate that I had a high school radio station. My story is vastly different than that of Leslie. Yes, it is.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. I never went to Idaho, but I did go to Toledo. I lived in Toledo and Springfield, Mass., and I made the rounds until I eventually came to Philadelphia in the late 80s. But it's what an opportunity. If I were a youngster today and I had a chance to be able to go to a sports broadcasting camp and learn from professionals, the guest speakers that we have, the athletes that we bring, it's remarkable. It's a great program. I can't think of a better way to be involved in helping young people than to help out with what Jeremy and Stephen have built at Play-by-Play Sports Broadcasting Camps.
That's great to hear. And Leslie, I mean, what would you say to a young person today? I mean, you probably say it to your own children, right? Who both want to.
Oh, they don't listen to me. No, that would you're assuming they would listen. They'll listen to Neil and Jeremy. Why do you think I sent them to camp? I spoke with a young woman last week who just graduated from University of Georgia, for instance, and I have these conversations every once in a while with people who are trying to break into the business and ask what to do. I can give them no guidance when it comes to how to get that first job because it's so incredibly different. I mean, we sent out VHS tapes with resumes. It's a whole lot different now. But what I find is we talked for an hour, and most often, to me, it's more of a life lesson than it is how to be a sports broadcaster. They've already, by the time they're coming to me, have had some of this experience, and it's about how you want to present yourself. How do you want to be portrayed? What's your story? Because they're building their brand on social media now. So who they are is who they're projecting in their everyday life. And at the Maxwell Club Awards, I was standing backstage with Chase Young, and what a stand-up guy. And he was standing there next to me, and he cursed, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I said, "Well, I've heard a few words over the years. However, I do have a microphone here and it's open." And he's like, "Oh, did they hear it?" And I said, "Nobody heard it, but it's a great lesson for you because there's a microphone open right here. There are microphones everywhere. You can't escape them. So if you want to be the guy who curses and whatever else it is, that's okay. But just know that that's who you're portraying yourself as. So what's your brand? Who are you? And what do you want to put out there?" And particularly for women, I think, I've always been the kind of person who just, "Hey, it's your sandbox. Can I play?" I've never been the person who runs in and says, "I deserve to be here because I'm a woman." I just went out there and did my job the best I could. And I've just always sort of been able to deal with the, verbal, the verbal dance that goes on when people are saying things in a locker room or a clubhouse. I just never had any issues. I could verbally spar with the best of them. So I try to tell people, particularly women, who are you going to be? Who do you want to be portrayed as? Because you're the one that's telling that story about yourself out there right now. And I also think it's critically important in this business to be yourself. When we first came up, Chris Berman and all of those guys on ESPN with their flashy sayings, and we're all out there, and everybody was imitating them. And that gets exhausting if you can't be you. And I say to people all the time, be yourself. And if they don't like you for who you are, then you might want to try something else. It's just, you're going to be in it for a long time. Like, people have to like who you put yourself out there as. And so, that's typically the message that I give younger people. I think it's just really important they stay true to themselves.
Well, I think it's a great message, and I think this is great advice. One of the things that we think about at 76 Capital is, as both of you know, we're investors in VSiN, which is the new sports betting network that was started by Brent Musburger. But we also have we have a picture. It's kind of a similar kind of a shot that we showed earlier of Comcast SportsNet. It's the kind of the original crew of people that have started this brand new sports betting network. And as we continue to grow and continue to now one of the coolest things ever is now we're on Comcast right underneath Netflix. There's an app right there, and there's VEASAN, and 45 million homes can see this channel that we just started ourselves, right? And it's been really amazing to watch that. But it's also been amazing to watch what and listen to what you just said, Leslie. It's about people really being able to express themselves and have their own voice and have an authentic voice, and that's one of the things that's really worked well for us. And we've gotten a lot of people who have given us advice. Well, we need this one, we need that one. I'm like, no, this is what we want. This is what we're going to do. And I'm really proud of Brian Musburger, who's the CEO of VEASAN, who has really just pushed that forward. And I'll tell you one thing, Leslie, though, we do need some female sportscasters that know sports betting. So if
I mentioned that to the girl that I talked, the young woman I spoke with last week. I said, there's opportunities in this space. You and I talked about that at the Maxwell Club Awards. I mean, that's you can carve. Leslie Visser, years ago, longtime sportscaster, told me one day early on, she said, don't ever say no to anything. I worked the Pro Bowlers tour on ESPN for 2 years. I would cover anything. And there's opportunities. I worked a show called NASCAR Garage for 6 years. They didn't even have women's clothes. I was in like a man's button-down shirt and a pair of khakis, and go cover whatever. You never know what door is going to open. And so many people say, oh, I want to be a sideline reporter for college football. That's like, this is going to sound bad, but that's not a hard job. Like when it comes down to it, you want to be a good journalist, and then you can go tell stories, and that might be one of the things you want to do. But don't pigeonhole yourself. It's such a mistake to say, this is the one thing I want to do. You got to keep the door open at all times.
Yeah, well, we have a great picture of you with Joe Paterno on the sidelines. I think you were doing an ESPN game. We would love to show that. I mean, that must have been amazing for you.
It was awesome. I did college football sideline for 2 years with ABC Sports. I got to cover. I probably two of the highlights of my career. I got to interview George W. Bush during the Little League World Series right before 9/11, and then I also got to report from the pace car, the Indy 500. Right there was pace car and a car right behind it. I was in the car right behind the pace car. I got to report from the Rose Parade, where I'd grown up watching that, growing up in California. So, I've had some really exciting opportunities, and we talk about the Philly sports. I mean, we talk about 2008 with the Phillies. Funny enough, my highlight, the biggest moment to me and the most exciting, was not when they won the World Series in 2008. I was underground. Like, we were waiting in a tunnel to get on the field. We didn't get to see the final out. The most exciting moment to me was in 2007 when they clinched a playoff spot, because it was they got there for the first time. The excitement with the guys when they won was like nothing I ever saw beyond that, because it was the first time. And they were so thrilled, and they were out fast. But the next year when they got there, they knew, we've been here before. Now it's all business. Now we got to get there at the next level. And so 2007 was an incredibly special moment when they clinched a playoff spot.
It's funny she brings that up, Wayne, because normally I was in the studio. I was not normally out in the field. And for that game, I was in the field, and I was one of the first reporters on the field. And you're interviewing players, hey, your emotions, all that. You guys, hey, you just clinched. And I get Charlie Manuel, and I'm talking to him on the field, and I remember looking around the stadium like, this is kind of like a dream. Like, think about it. If you're an ultimate sports fan, it's one of the few times I really thought like, whoa, this is pretty darn cool, because they're in the middle of celebrating one of the greatest moments in their professional careers. And I'm right there, and I'm right in the middle of it. And so we've all had opportunities to experience those kind of things. But when she mentioned 2007, that was pretty cool. I got to say, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well,
but I always feel that way, Neil. I always felt that way going on I always told myself that going onto a baseball field, it's to be out there. This is where I work. This is my job. Yeah. So yeah, I've always felt the same way.
Well, I appreciate both of you and for taking so much time, taking time out of your Sunday to spend time with us here during our 76 Capital Leadership Series. I love the stories. I'm sure all the viewers did as well. And it's just great to have both of you on the show. It's great to call both of you friends. I hope we can do a lot more together. I'm so excited for with all the things that you're doing, Neil, at Rowan. We didn't even get to talk about all the great things that we're doing there from an esports perspective. Who could imagine you'd be talking about esports in the sports world and video games? That's a whole nother world that we're also all involved with. And, that doing a lot at Rowan with that, and, keep up the great work there. And also with play-by-play sports broadcasting camps with hopefully both of you doing more and more there. And Leslie, just keep being the best real estate agent out there, you can be, and just keep making it happen. And let's figure out ways that we can all help each other and do more together.
Awesome. Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks for having us, Wayne.
And I appreciate that. And just before we wrap up, just want to mention briefly that we have 2 really exciting shows next week. We have on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, we have the Chief Revenue Officer of Barstool Sports, Deirdre Lester. She's a great friend and someone who is doing incredible things at Barstool Sports. We know her from her, originally she was the Chief Revenue Officer of Whistle Sports that we're an investor in. So Deirdre is doing incredible things. As many of you know, Barstool Sports did a incredible partnership deal with Penn National Gaming. It was the talk of Super Bowl. It's the next thing in and around sports betting. They're doing awesome things. We'll have a great conversation with Deirdre. And then on next Sunday, we'll have Jessica Gelman. Jessica is the CEO of Kraft Analytics Group. That's Bob Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots. She's the CEO of that group. And she also is the co-founder of the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, probably the premier sports conference in the country, and she started that. So we're excited about the 2 dynamic women that we're going to have on the show this week. And again, want to thank both Leslie and Neil. Really appreciate you joining our show, and love the stories, love your passion and excitement about sports and Philly sports and wanting to help young people. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks
Have
again,
a great
Wayne.
night, everybody.
Good to see you, Neil.
Bye, Leslie.
And if you want to follow us, you can follow us at 76capital.com and all of our social handles, whether that's on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also you can register and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Thanks, everybody, and have a great night.